The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Okay, that was Julian Assange there at the top. I know you've heard that before. That was at an anti-war rally in London in 2010. And then, of course, Anton Karas, the third man. I like to give him credit every time I play that theme song, which I have now for, I think, 6 or 7 years. By the way, I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico live on the fly here on the Progressive Radio Network. Today's show will also be seen at Assange Countdown to Freedom.com, on Rokefin, and other platforms as well. Too many to mention. Today is an Assange Countdown to Freedom special. Now, we were supposed to have Stefania Maurizio on today, along with Nils Melzer, doing a special introduction. She's got a new book out. It's a bestseller. And she was doing an exclusive interview with us today, but she had some family issues in Milan, so she got on a plane from Rome to Milan. We could have done it tomorrow or the next day, but we'll do it for next Wednesday, not Wednesday, but Monday, the 27th. At any rate, we've got a great show today. What we are going to do today, and I've been wanting to do this a long time, and that is to play excerpts from all three, the best of our interviews with Julian Assange. We did 3 interviews with him between 2016, 2017, and they were long interviews. And so we're going to play 10, 12 minutes from each interview. I want everyone to be reminded how brilliant, how cogent, how smart, and how important Julian Assange was then, and is right now. And probably the reason why they don't want him talking, they don't want him operating. But listen to these 3 interviews, excerpts, and you get a pretty good range there, view of the intellect and the articulate quality. I mean, this guy is so articulate and so brilliant. I figured it's time to play these excerpts. So maybe it was a blessing in disguise, Stefania having to fly to Milan, but we'll have her next week, along with some commentary by Nils Melzer. What else? There are a lot of things going on. Steve Donziger, of course, on October 1st will be sentenced, and we need a big crowd out there at 500 Pearl Street. I know that Roger Waters is going to be there. He's always there. Roger Waters, who, by the way, has been a real godsend to this show. We were running out of, because we have a labor-intensive show here, and Roger Waters came in, and we're good. We're good now through Christmas. So there'll be no more passing the hat around until, the new year, probably. So he'll be there. Susan Sarandon will be there, and I'll be there, and Bianca will be there, and many others. So that's October 1st at 8 a.m., 500 Pearl Street. What else is happening? Well, what else is happening are two big comedy events, and the name of the event for both places is Stand-Ups for Assange. In New York City, the 24th, the Sunday of October, in DC, the 16th of October, in a place called the Tabard Inn. In New York City, it's at St. Mark's Theater at St. Mark's. Theater 80 at St. Mark's. I'm not going to do this again. Theater 80 at St. Mark's. Okay. Just send me an email if you're interested in going, and that would be at AssangeCountdown@gmail.com. AssangeCountdown@gmail.com. We got Lee Camp. We've got Katie Halper. We got Max Blumenthal. We got Margaret Kimberly. We got Margaret Ratner Kunstler. We got the Raphael Dlugoff Ragtime Quintet. And you got me and much more. All right. So look it up. Look up the Assange comedy specials coming up. Stand Up for Assange, both in DC and in New York City. And write to me, AssangeCountdown@gmail.com. All right. Now, during these interviews, by the way, we're going to be talking to him, and he's going to refer to something that took place in January, February 2016. And we're talking about Assange, and that is the United Nations special crew on arbitrary detention. And the name of the guy is Christophe Pouchot, where they determined that Assange was being illegally detained and deserved to be released right away and compensated. So his name is Christophe Pouchot, I believe, and we're gonna play what he said back then, because Assange is going to refer to this. Now, this is from the UN guy from January 2016.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been arbitrarily detained by Sweden and the United Kingdom since his arrest in London on 7 December 2010 as a result of the legal action taken against him by both governments. The expert panel called on the Swedish and British authorities to end Mr. Assange's deprivation of liberty. I think the recommendation is quite clear. Respect his physical integrity and freedom of movement, and afford him the right to compensation.
Okay, well, they didn't listen. The Brits and the US and all the others involved, the Swedes and Ecuadorian new government, Linda Moreno, they just said, screw it. And no matter what we throw at them, they don't care. Whether it be Nils Melzer, Amnesty, Reporters Without Borders, UC Global scandal, no matter what it is, they just continue because they don't want him operating for some reason. And so the struggle continues. And there's a documentary coming out, by the way. I spoke to Gabriel Shipton earlier today. And he, of course, is the brother of Julian. And he's got a documentary coming out that features the struggle by Julian's father, Gabriel's father, John Shipton, and Stella Morris, Mr. Assange's partner and the mother of his two kids. So that is coming out soon. It's called Ithaca. And we're going to play what's called a teaser. This is not the trailer. This is a teaser from the up and coming soon documentary called Ithaca. Now listen to this.
What's at stake? For Julian, his life. For you guys, any prestige that you can gather as a journalist protects you. So this will be the end. Nobody ever again will be able to get the assistance of 100,000 people worldwide to defend them, 100 lawyers, 6 jurisdictions, in order to defend Julian Assange. It'll never happen again. If he goes down, so will journalism.
We will never accept that journalism is a crime in this country or any other. Let's not forget that US agents plotted to kill Julian on British soil. Their illegal operations even targeted our 6-month-old baby. Julian's freedom is coupled to all our freedom, and our freedoms are lost in the blink of an eye. I ask you all to shout louder, lobby harder, until he is free. I call on the President of the United States to end this now. Let our little boys have their father. Free Julian. Free the press. Free us all.
Okay, so if you get a chance, try to find that documentary when it comes out. Of course, I'll be sending it around everywhere, and try to attend, no matter where it is, the opening of that documentary somewhere online. And if it costs money, pay it, because it goes for a good cause. All right, so I guess that's just about it. We're going to go here to one of the very first interviews with Julian Assange was August 25th, 2016 on the Pacifica Network. And we're going to play that excerpt right now. And we talked about a range of things beginning, it was prior to the 2016 election. And we talk about the election and Hillary and Democrats and Republicans, Trump, and he had very good analysis. So we're going to play that. And he talks about this joke about Roger Stone being a back channel and some other things. So we're going to play that. And when we come back, we'll introduce the next clip.
Sitting in that room there, looking at this election in the United States, what is your overview of this election in the United States? If I may just get away from...
Well, in some ways, it's super interesting. In other ways, it's fairly boring. You've got two candidates deeply disliked by both groups of population. Hillary Clinton, who's kind of a predictable, boring, liberal war hawk. Although I think probably now you have to question whether she's a liberal war hawk because she's brought all the neocons onto her side as well.
She's close to Henry Kissinger, you know.
No, it's much worse than that. She's like Robert Kagan, and who's the wife of Victoria Nuland, who was one of her best buddies at the State Department, who was behind a lot of the problems with Ukraine, has piled up with her, has made fundraising dinners for her. William Crystal,
right,
has also
endorsed
called
her.
Everyone to vote for, endorsed her, vote for Hillary. There's about 30 now. Basically, nearly all the neocons that were behind the Iraq War have now backed Hillary.
So
that tells you something very interesting. It tells you something about Hillary Clinton, but it also tells you something about Donald Trump, and it tells you something about the neocons. So the neocons' sense of identity and their interests are not strongly co-aligned with the Republican Party.
Right.
So they don't view, because I've believed naively that the neocons were deeply Republican, and why, if their interests differed to the candidate Donald Trump for whatever reasons, they might not aggressively push him. That's very different to crossing the floor and, if you like, backing the enemy as far as the Republicans are concerned. So all along, the neocons were not really Republican. They were something else, and they had a different agenda.
You think that if she wins, she's going to continue the warmongering policies that have basically been going on for about the last 40 years. She's...
Unfortunately, I think she'll accelerate it. There'll be a moderately significant uptick compared to her under the Obama administration. But remember, this period from 2009-2012 of Hillary Clinton being Secretary of State in the Obama administration produced a lot of conflict. Hillary Clinton got out at the end, and so John Kerry had to deal with it. But if you look at the successes by John Kerry, diplomatic successes, at his term in office compared to Hillary Clinton's, there's a world of difference. Now, to be fair to her, you could say some of the reason for this is that Obama's trying to move into his legacy phase, and after having, satisfied broadly speaking, the military-industrial complex in the United States and a bunch of other powerful actors, he's now moving into a position to shore up his historical reputation after he leaves office. So John Kerry might have been given a little more rein than Hillary Clinton was. But yeah, there's significant diplomatic successes under John Kerry in terms of peacemaking, deal-making, reduction of tension. But Hillary Clinton's time in office saw the opposite.
Right. So you think going forward, it's going to be continued, even though she's in a weak...
That's just analysis on results in office. But there's a lot of other indicators, what she has said in her emails, the types of people that she chooses to associate, the types of people who endorse her, her positions on legislation and on war, but her being the leading, her not only being the leading voice in the administration to bring about the bombing of Libya and the destruction of the Libyan state, but being towards the end of 2011 so proud of that effort that inside the State Department she produced, or had her staff produce, what we call a Libya brag sheet. It's all and what they call a TikTok. It's the chronological description of how she was the central figure in bringing about the destruction of the Libyan state.
I'm trying to think of, is there anything that she did that was good during her tenure as Secretary of State? I can't think of anything. What about Honduras?
I'm sure there must be something. It's politicians sell themselves, and the State Department sells itself. So there's already an oversupply of an institution bringing out her good points. So of course, investigative journalists concentrate on the negatives.
I've been
none come to mind. I'm sure there must be some.
Well, I can't think of any. I've written articles about her. She was running for Senate here in 2000, and now she pushed herself as this big progressive when it comes to civil rights, Black Lives Matter. She lives just a mile away from 2 prisons, female prisons, Bedford Hills and Taconic prisons. She never once dropped by, not one time did she drop by to say hello to the prisoners, and they're 94% Black and Latino in both of those prisons, maximum security prisons, just a mile away. And so I get a lot of heat that by attacking Hillary, which I do here whenever I have a chance at this radio station, I get a lot of heat that I'm actually helping out Donald Trump by attacking Hillary Clinton. I mean, this is the Democratic Party's problem, that they chose a very weak candidate with a real sordid background. You are getting a lot of heat. People are saying, well, Julian's basically going to help Donald Trump. Is there really a difference between these two?
Yes, there are differences between them.
In your mind?
There are significant differences between them as individuals. I think that speak in both directions. The issue, I think, is more of the Republican Party and look, individual presidents, once they are in office, and are established don't really do much. Most of their time, they are just taking the briefing sheets that are given to them, reading them to teleprompters, the briefing sheets that they're given for meetings, or then sometimes they are given 2 or 3 alternatives by the secretaries and members of cabinet and asked to choose between them. So, it's not like the alternatives that are presented to them are diametrically opposed. So that they're alternatives plucked from a very narrow pond. And where are they produced from? Well, they're produced from the major U.S. corporations and their ability to inject proposals to go into governmental decision-making and lobby for particular ones to be selected, and from the bureaucracies, the CIA, Department of Homeland Security, the Army, Pentagon, Veterans Affairs, etc. There's just one point where the candidate really does make a difference, and that is in the appointment phase. So there's about 3,500 positions that are appointed in the few months of the government coming into office. And so Hillary Clinton will select certain cronies, people she owes favor, etc. And those people will be appointed to various positions, and they in turn will recommend to her other appointments. And similarly, with Donald Trump, he will be appointing a whole bunch of people that come out of, his real estate network, people he's met in the entertainment industry, new friends that he's made during this campaign. And where there are gaps in his own personal network of trust, he will be feeding from what the Republican Party offers him.
Do you think he's really trying to win, or do you think he's tanking it?
I think it's a very interesting question, whether it was a serious campaign in the beginning, whether there are allegations. I don't have any evidence. It's amusing to speculate whether Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, who allegedly spoke to him about whether he should run, given that they have a close association in the past, that the Clintons might have thought it would be helpful to have Donald Trump in there. I think it is clear now, given the amount of effort that he's putting into things, the amount of time that it's consuming, that he's either was genuinely always intending to run as far as possible, or he has become trapped into it.
Right. Well, I'm not like a big conspiracy person, but I got to tell you, here it feels like watching this that he's part of the team, because he's about the only person that she could possibly beat with her record.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty true. Although amongst those 17 Republican candidates, there was a lot of chaff. There are also some
maybe
rather
Rand Paul.
poor candidates. Not in terms of saying so much the very inflammatory, divisive things that Trump says that alienates whole groups of the population.
I mean, some of the people around him, Rudy Giuliani, this guy, Chris Christie, this sheriff from Arizona, this nutcase racist sheriff, Arpaio. It's very difficult to like him, but there are other candidates. There's Gary Johnson and there's Jill Stein. Jill Stein called you a hero. What do you think about her campaign?
Well, I think she's clearly a brave woman, and the Greens are brave this election by sticking up for WikiLeaks and its right to publish and its imprisoned sources and so on. Obviously, we hear that as something that's important. It's actually a really good signal that is possible in the U.S. political debate. I mean, of course, whether it's possible for someone like Jill Stein to be elected is another matter.
Well, it's almost impossible for her to be elected.
She has said these things, and there is some reportage. It's not been smashed in everyone's face like the Trump and Clinton campaign coverage, but there is a little bit.
One of Trump's supporters Roger Stone, who I know. I actually know Roger Stone. He was on this show, go figure, a couple of weeks back. But he bandied your name. But then, of course, he backtracked and said he didn't know. He didn't have any communication with you. But, he does toss things around.
Roger Stone is a rather canny spin master.
Yes.
And we have not had any communication with him whatsoever.
Yes.
I do imagine his position. He wants to. I mean, he has said nice things about us. I think he said that I was a hero. So okay, that's nice. We appreciate that kind of thing. So I'm not minded to criticize him too much for doing something that any kind of political operative would do, which is basically to try and get in on get in on our publications in some way by suggesting that he had something to do with it. But actually, no, it's all our hard work and the hard work of our sources.
Right, and you are doing a
Republicans have not helped at all. If they want to donate money like anyone else,
yes,
then
that's
they
a
can
thing.
Do that. We'd welcome that.
Well, before
if they want to give us accurate documents, which we will check, of course, on the Clinton campaign, we'd welcome that. And similarly, we'd welcome it from the Clintons or Stein or whoever.
Maybe you'll get some money from the CGI, the Clinton Global Initiative. Have you
Yeah, I doubt
applied?
it.
Now, let me say, but while we're there, people who want to, we're talking to Julian Assange at WikiLeaks in the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. It's 11 o'clock there. Is it 10 o'clock, 10:30?
It's very hot. It's the hottest August in London ever.
It's the hottest. What do we have Celsius?
And there's no air
33?
conditioning in the embassy.
You have no air conditioning? I got to tell you, you look great. I see you on television with Jake Tapper the other day. How do you maintain your energy and your health? I mean, you work out of the embassy?
Well, I have an exercise regime. You have to do these types of things, but I am in love with understanding the world and sharing that understanding with other people. It's a bit hard to describe how much I am in love with that, and have been for many years. And then, at the same time, when you're in a conflict, when people are trying to, malign your work or engaging banking blockades, or as they are doing, attempting to send me and other people to prison, it's very stimulating, and so you feel energetic under these circumstances. When you've been attacked.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure it must be an impossible situation day in and day out. But you've done an incredible job. You're, just a remarkable example of strength and hope. And I know you're taking a huge sacrifice. When you got into this business, you knew it was possible that something like this would happen eventually. Am I right?
Sure. I actually expected it, not exactly this, but something close to this. A couple of years earlier, actually, I thought it would happen.
Well, here I just saw the UN has formally found, I think it was actually in February, that you were unlawfully detained by Sweden and the UK. Can you expand on that?
Yes, on February 5, the United Nations formally found that I am being illegally detained by Sweden and the UK and must be immediately released and compensated. So that's obviously a hugely significant win for us. The UK and Sweden so far have actively defied that ruling. They have paid some diplomatic consequences for it. Hopefully those consequences will increase over time.
Okay, how good was that? So the entire interview you can see actually at Anonymous Scandinavia's YouTube account. That was an interview on radio that he turned into a video. Now, the next one as well is Anonymous Scandinavia. If you want to see the whole interview, you'll have to find it. I believe it's still there at Anonymous Scandinavia on YouTube. But here's an excerpt, and this is the very last interview. It was a long interview. It was an hour interview. It was with him and his partner, Stella Morris, but we're just going to play parts with him. And it begins by talking about Kent State, and then we talk about Russiagate, and then he tells a story about a guy spending 55 years in prison who is a big fan of Julian. You cannot believe that last story here. So we're going to go to that and come back and then have one more segment of interviews with Julian Assange. We'll be right back.
Julian, I just want to make just a couple of observations first, and that is this woman called me last night. Her name is Laura Krause. She's a sister of Alison Krause, who was the one of the four that were killed on May 4th, 1970 at Kent State. And
murdered in cold blood, shall we say.
Right, murdered in cold blood by the National Guard. That's Dennis Bernstein. We'll get to you in a second. All right, so she said that WikiLeaks, and she really thanked God and had a lot of gratitude for WikiLeaks preserving and getting some very, very important documents. And I just thought I'd convey that to you. Are you aware of that?
I am aware, even as an Australian, this important part of U.S. history. But no, we didn't. Interestingly, we didn't intend, if you like, to specifically publish Kent State documents. It's part of one of our big archives of cable documents called the Kissinger cables from the 1970s. But we know that when you take the internal communications of the State Department or another major powerful organization, that it tends to touch on nearly everything. And the public's ability to spot connections in your material that are relevant at the time that you publish it and after, or in this case even before, greatly outstrips your own, that the public intelligence is much greater. And so I'm always filled with extreme irritation with those journalists who sit upon hordes of national historical treasure. You know, how our human institutions in a variety of countries have actually behaved, because the public's ability to understand it and connect it to their own personal histories, take it and use it in litigation, use it in political campaigns, is much greater than the rather narrow and relatively provincial character of any particular journalist or editor, including me.
All right. I thank you, Julian, for staying on as long as you have. Dennis, why don't you get one last quick question in there, and we'll bring on the...
All right. I don't know if this is quick, but and maybe it's a naive question, but would you characterize or consider...
Well, Dennis, you know what they say. Better to be naive and do something, because the realists have left the world in the situation that it is.
Well, thank you. So I will just stumble towards the truth here if I can, and ask you if you consider the DNC flow out of the information flow out of the DNC a hack or a leak?
Well, that's interesting. This is a sourcing question. So there's lots of different alleged flows actually out of the DNC over a 2-year period. If you read rather closely, seemingly by maybe 5 different actors of different kinds, state actors, domestic actors, it's not entirely clear. These are statements coming out of U.S. intelligence. If you read closely, actually I haven't seen those repeated in 2007, but they were earlier on in 2016. So we don't talk about sourcing in that way. What we talk about is our publications, and that they're completely accurate, and that our publications did not come from a state actor. We haven't said anything else about them, and we probably won't say anything else about them. We have to see how things develop, but probably we won't say anything else but that. because if we start fleshing in more details, it makes it easier to catch our sources, which we obviously don't want.
All right, I wasn't going to ask you that question, but I wanted to ask you this one, Julian. We'll let you get off on this one, get out with this one, and that is a lot of the letters that you get. You were talking to me the other day about one contribution from somebody in a prison. Can you tell us about that, and then we'll move on here.
Okay, Randy, this is the last question. You're sneaky. Well, I would, in some ways, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know whether I can name the guy, so I'm not going to. He probably does deserve to be named. But I get quite a lot of letters from prisoners. I don't know why they're writing to me. I've been detained in one form or another without charge for 7 years, including in violation of 2 UN rulings. So I don't know why they're looking for me for legal advice. But one letter particularly sticks in my mind. It was from the United States, from a 22-year-old man. He'd been sentenced to 55 years in prison. And you think, when I in fact read the letter, I thought, 55 years, okay, he's a murderer of some kind. No. He's a young punk, and police were picking on him, and maybe he was a robber as well. I don't know, but yeah, he's being chased by the cops downtown, and so chasing him, he pointed towards them and he fired a shot, and it missed the cop. That's it. I checked out the case with the records, with what was in the newspaper. His description is completely accurate. That's it. In prison for 55 years, attempted murder of a cop, unlawful possession of firearm, firing a firearm within city limits, etc. 55 years.
Wow. And he made a $10 contribution as well to WikiLeaks, I believe.
Yeah, and I was astounded because I opened a letter and there was a check to me from the Department of Justice.
Right.
And given this enormous grand jury proceeding that they're trying to, trying to prosecute me and potentially my staff with espionage and a whole lot of other things relating to our releases on the Iraq-Afghan war and so on. I thought this was quite interesting to see that this institution that's trying to prosecute me was sending me a check. But it turned out it was this prisoner had sent me $10.
Wow.
And the prisoners, they can't access normal bank accounts, so the DOJ has little accounts for them, and they put their money in the DOJ account. So when they want to send money somewhere, it comes from the DOJ.
That's what I might call a bad check.
All right. Listen, I'm sorry I snuck.
I looked quite a lot into his case.
Yeah.
It seems like he has no appeal opportunities.
Wow.
From what I can determine, unless there's amnesty or some significant changing of the law.
I'm going to look into that case here.
We had a luck.
I'm going to look into that case right here. We are going to let you go. Finally, we kept you overtime here. So thank you very much, Julian. We're going to say goodbye.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you.
Thanks. Free speech outfits have to look out for each other.
Okay, so that was the last time we interviewed Julian Assange. Of course, 5 or 6 months later, he was totally shut down. The second time we interviewed him, the second out of 3, was April 11th, 2017. He had done earlier the day before Amy Goodman's show, Democracy Now!, and he got sandbagged by this reporter by the name of Alan Nairn. And it was a very unfortunate, uncomfortable, and unseemly thing to have done to Julian. So I got a call that night and he said, I'd like to do your show the next day. And so I said, sure. I had John Pilger already booked for that next day. I told John, he says, well, then drop me and just put Julian on. I said, no, we've been planning this. I'll put you both on. You'll do the first half, he'll do the second half, and you'll listen. And if you want to ask questions, you could ask questions. Well, what happened was he did the first 35, 40 minutes, and then Julian was on for 20. He didn't say a thing, he just listened. But at the end, he capped it with a statement that I've used many times on this show at the cold opening. So you'll recognize what he says at the very end, and that'll be the end of this particular interview when you hear John Pilger make that statement. But we talked about the persecution of Assange, why they are doing it, talking about Wood Julian himself, and he gives us a very cogent display of his knowledge of Swedish history and how reactionary the country really is. You got to listen to this. It's so good, this interview. And I was hoping we could have continued into the news hour back then, but we couldn't. But I think you'll enjoy this. And after this, we'll be right back to say goodbye.
Also from Australia, Julian Assange. Thank you, Julian, for joining us today.
Hey, Randy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you for being part of this. You know, I've been trying to get you for about 6 months now, and I'm thrilled that you are on. I have the greatest journalist on the planet and the greatest publisher on the planet at the same time, and both are from Australia. You've known John for a long time?
I've certainly known of him for many decades, and I've known him personally for maybe 8 years now. And he's been a big supporter in the situation that I'm going through in this country.
Yes, and let's talk about that, what you're going through. A lot of people really don't understand why you are there. What did you do to be there and be a political prisoner inside that embassy?
Well, it's interesting. Do you need to do something in order to have a kind of modern interstate system make life very difficult for you and detain you without charge, in my case, for 7 years? I'm not sure you do. That's part of the problem when justice becomes arbitrary. The system doesn't just strike out at its critics. The institutions that comprise it are also fearsomely stupid, especially where they're engaged in secrecy, because excellence is not promoted by secrecy, because poor work can be covered up, or poorly performing contractors are not favored under contractors that perform well. So I'm not sure you do actually need to do anything wrong. The system can just come down on your head, and you can be swept up in it for decades. In my particular case, of course, I have rather specialized in my life since being a young teenager in provoking the hell out of it. So I do kind of understand that it's, in that sense, it's to be expected in the sort of world that I am living in, which is exposing these large and powerful organizations. And of course, by definition, if they're large and powerful, they have an ability to suppress their critics in one way or another. And I wouldn't say that it's particularly about suppressing me individually, but the example is they're perceived as terrible. It's like Cuba itself was, at least post-Cuban Missile Crisis, strategically not very important, but as an example to the rest of Latin America, it was extremely important in encouraging defiance of the will of the U.S. government and the various security complexes that make it up.
Do you, Julian Assange, believe that there's? I mean, I do. I mean, you mentioned this yesterday on another show about the modern McCarthyism. Could you elaborate on that?
I should answer your previous question properly, because I'm sure your listeners will be irritated. It's just I answer this question so often, it becomes a bit boring to just kind of look at the facts. But WikiLeaks started about a decade ago, and we publish authentic materials, official materials from all around the world. The US produces an unusual number of them. So we tend to publish more from the US than from other countries. And that's easily understandable when you realize that the US has the most amount of money going into the secret state. So there's more than 5 million people in the United States with security clearances, well over 1.3 million with top secret security clearances. So that effectively is a state within a state. And then the cultural values expressed in the United States, its own self-story, has some honorable cultural traditions, and those come in conflict with the reality of U.S. foreign policy. So the tension between the two produces incentives for whistleblowers and dissidents to emerge. Then simply the scale of it means that quite a number of them do emerge. And so a grand jury was started in 2010, what the U.S. government internally called a whole-of-government investigation, criminal and intelligence investigation against me and other people in WikiLeaks. One of our alleged sources, Chelsea Manning, was sentenced to 35 years in prison. He was severely abused in 2011, 2012. UN Special Rapporteur on Torture formally found that he had been subject to cruel and inhumane treatment. That grand jury continues on in my case, and the US government has just announced that it has expanded it to also include our recent CIA publications. It's run by the National Security Division of the DOJ and by the Criminal Division of the DOJ. It's a big thing. It spread agents all over the world, chartered private jets to Iceland, pulled people back to be secretly interrogated, coercively forced people to testify, and it's a there's an extensive series of legal maneuvers by my lawyers and the lawyers of Chelsea Manning, and also some NGOs in the United States to try and check that ongoing process. And in response to that, the government of Ecuador gave me political asylum in 2012, and there's a variety of complications of other legal processes. And I've been physically in the embassy since that point in time. Let me just kind of conclude with the most recent developments. On the 5th of February 2016, the UN announced its formal finding. I sued the states of the UK and Sweden at the United Nations, and I won, and it was ruled that I should be released immediately and compensated. The UK then appealed that ruling, and it lost on the 11th of November.
I see. And so where does it stand now? What is the legal battle ahead at this point in time? I mean, it's a two-front battle. You have the U.S. and then you have these trumped-up charges from Sweden.
No charges, Randy. No charges.
Right. I'm sorry, trumped-up allegations?
At any point in time.
Okay, all right. So you've never been charged with anything, that's the deal. You've never been charged. I'm sorry that I said that, but they keep throwing that out there. And so why does Sweden want you?
Well, Sweden has shifted in its position. So Sweden became well known in the. This is an interesting story. I will try and get through it quickly. Going back to the 1920s, Sweden entered into that period of European utopianism that was there both on the Nazi right and that was present in the left. Both those elements were strongly present in Sweden, including the Nazi Party. Sweden itself had a relatively new vision of democracy. It's not, if you look at its origins, it's not really part of the Western European cultural process. It introduced political parties about the turn of the century. Then when it entered into World War II, it allied with Nazi Germany up until 1944, when it saw that the Nazis were going to lose, and then it started to shift its alignment to the United States. But it never properly denazified. There was no revolution or anything like that. And in the war period, Sweden became very rich. I'm not from Sweden, I'm an Australian, but I've become a bit of a Sweden nerd. In the war period, Sweden became very rich by breaking sanctions and setting up a lot of German fronts within Stockholm and shipping about 40% of all the iron ore to the German war machine. So it came out at the end of World War II with about 2 decades of advancement compared to the rest of Western Europe, and was one of the wealthiest countries in the world of any size. Its nearest rival being the United States. So it leapt forward about 10 years in terms of economic development, and the rest of Western Europe went back about 10 years. The result is that Sweden took on an appearance of accelerated modernity, and the utopian elements that had existed in the 1920s came together in this post-war period to produce not a classical social democracy, but something rather different. Sweden is the most oligarched country in Western Europe. What does that mean? It means that just a few families control more of the wealth in the country than any other country in Western Europe.
I had no
So
idea.
these giant Swedish industrialists were never stripped of their power by revolution or liberation as a result of kicking out an occupying force. Instead, a system of a merger between the industrialists, the oligarchs, you would say, in a modern context, the unions and the political parties occurred. And that ended up producing what we would call a Swedish social democracy. And that then became famous as something as a kind of political phenomenon to be envied. I think looking back, it's really rather questionable how true that ever was. But by the 1980s, it had shifted its position and started to publicly ally itself with the West, but no one really cared by that point in time. Under the surface, it had entered into a secret intelligence sharing agreement by 1954 with the GCHQ in the United Kingdom and with the National Security Agency in the United States, and that went to a mass surveillance agreement in the early 2000s, and the Swedish military-industrial complex, which is a big part of the Swedish economy, sort of became very tightly integrated with the US and UK supply chain. So Sweden, as a state, it has its problems like all states. It has some good things going for it, but it is not in any way independent from the United States, unfortunately.
Well, I thank you for that history lesson. I had no idea. I mean, I look back at Sweden in the 80s. John Pilger is on the other line talking about Nicaragua. Olof Palme certainly helped out Nicaragua a lot, and that's the vision I have of Sweden back in the 80s. And I thought it was just recently they drifted on this right wing course. But that's
it's been happening. It's been happening since at least '86, when Olof Palme was assassinated in Sweden. Yeah, but I mean, there was a period of time, about 5 years really, where Sweden was supplying about a quarter of the budget of the ANC, not for very long, and was also taking a number of refugees from Chile under Pinochet, routed through its embassy system and so on. So it's interesting to think what that was about. Sweden historically is a country of empire, but as Western Europe, other Western European countries got bigger, it hasn't been able to kind of seriously invade countries out of its borders for about 200 years now. But it does have a certain ideological, empirical ambition from time to time, and that has allied with particular other ideological or geopolitical tendencies in the rest of the world as time has gone by. But since the late 80s, it's been very much in the embrace of the United States.
That's some analysis there. I
So
told
they
you.
don't like to. They don't like to say it.
I know they have this image of being some progressive nation like Switzerland being neutral. But I got to move away from that because we have 4 minutes left here. This is moving very quickly. We got less than 4 minutes. All right. So I have to ask. This whole thing about Russia and trying to vilify you as some agent of the Russians. It's complete garbage. What is your response to that?
Well, it is complete garbage. We've published more than 600,000 documents about Russia, Vladimir Putin. Many of those documents have gone on to legal court cases, and books have been written about the Russian organized crime as a result of our publication. So it's just complete nonsense. If you look at what the allegations are about our non-electoral publications, well, about a year and a half ago, we published John Brennan's emails, the last Obama head of the Central Intelligence Agency. The allegation there, that everyone doesn't say very much about it because it doesn't help them politically, is that those were hacked by a 16-year-old boy in the UK Midlands. And he had a pal in the United States who's about 22, who helped promote him. That's the allegation. And they've been formally charged. Our most recent publication about the Central Intelligence Agency, a very serious publication. In fact, it's the largest intelligence publication in history, or will be by the time it's complete. Definitely the largest known intelligence leak in history. The allegation by the U.S. government is that originates from a contractor. They haven't worked out which one yet, they say. But that's the allegation. So, yeah, I mean, it's very boring in a way. It's Democrats.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's obvious stuff. It's the Democratic Party, normally on election loss, would go through a hell of a recrimination game and see who was responsible for the loss and purge them from their positions of influence and replace them with others.
Right.
That was a historical moment that the Democrats could have had.
They certainly could have. My opinion is this.
They could have had that. They could have had it, but they were successful in hyping up this Russian narrative and thereby distracting from what would be the normal course of events.
I would like to invite you back next week. This is just the beginning. I want to talk about Vault number 7, about Grasshopper. There's so much to talk about. We just barely broached some of the things that are on my notes here. I want to thank Julian Assange, the greatest publisher, man of great integrity, John Pilger, one of the greatest journalists around today. The two of you say goodbye to each other, and we'll...
Randy,
I'm not saying goodbye to
Julian.
John. I'm not saying goodbye
good
to
to hear
John.
you. But Randy, I just want to say it's Julian Assange and WikiLeaks that have returned honor to journalism. Julian is a truth teller, and that's what has upset those who continue what Goebbels called the big lie.
Well, there you go. Excerpts from all three of our interviews with Julian Assange. Don't forget, coming up on October 16th, DC at the Tabard Inn, and in New York City a week later on the 24th, October 24th, at the Theater 80 St. Mark's, on St. Mark's Place in First Avenue. Great theater. Lorcan Otway and his wife Jeannie are really excited about this, and so am I. We got great comedians and speakers in both places. All right, and October 1st, get out there for Steve Donziger. I've been Randy Credico, and this has been Assange Countdown to Freedom on the Progressive Radio Network. Next week, we have Stefani Modici and Nils Melzer. We're going to go out here with the great Roger Waters. This is him in London singing I Wish You Were Here at an Assange rally there. And see you soon. Thank you.
So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain? Can you tell it from a cold steel red, a smile from a veil? Do you think you can tell? And if they get you to trade your heroes for ghosts, hot ashes for trees, and hot air, cool breeze, cold comfort for change, and then you exchange a walk-on part of the war for a lead role in the pitch. The same old fear, and I wish that you would.